So tonight I will introduce our speaker. Stuart studied fine art printmaking at Grey School of Art in Aberdeen. He's had a long-standing involvement with the Glasgow Print Studio. He was a member of staff starting in 1984, was named studio manager in 1989, and in 2002 until now, he's been the studio etching master. He primarily works in etching, mezzotint, digital printmaking, and oil printmaking. As you will see, Jerusalem has become central to Stuart's work since his first residency in the city as part of an international artist exchange between Jerusalem Print Workshop and the Glasgow Print Studio. Stuart has won a variety of awards for his work, most importantly including the William Gillis Bequest through the RSA in 2016. This award enabled Stuart to continue to travel and research in Jerusalem. Stuart again traveled back to the city in 2019, thanks to his family and his 60th birthday fund, to put it into his words. That residency also coincided with a solo printmaking exhibition of his work in Jerusalem. Stuart's current exhibition at the RSA, entitled Peace Starts with a Smile, consists of new work specifically made for the RSA, but is largely the result of his last two residencies in Jerusalem. Through his experiences there, Stuart sees the welfare of this historic city as a barometer of the well-being of our own humanity. The complex issues seen throughout the city have become a constant source of influence in Stuart's work, as well as his approach to life. I do recommend, if you have not done so already, please book in a time to go see his exhibition at the RSA. It's open until the 22nd of November, and you can book your space at on the RSA website. I will stop myself there so you can hear from Stuart himself. Thank you all again for joining. Stuart, the floor is all yours.
I think that was my cue, wasn't it? Yeah, well, thank you. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another one of the Royal Scottish Academy's live from the Academicians studio events. Welcome from my studio, well, one of them anyway. This is my home studio here up in rural Aberdeenshire. So what makes an artist tick? What makes this artist tick? We'll maybe come back to that in a minute or two, but for those of you who maybe don't know me so well, although I've been an academician since the mid-90s, I thought I'd start just by relating to you a few of the answers to some questions I was asked for a 20-question style interview for the International Arts Manager magazine a few years ago. And a couple of the questions, they went like this. The first one was name, Stuart Duffin. Well, that was the easy one, wasn't it? Age 57 almost at the time of publishing in June 2016. So work it out. Occupation, artist, printmaker, painter, educator. Most important tool, my collection of antique mezzotint rocking tools in conjunction with my razor sharp scraper and my coffee pot. Artists are cultural figures who have most influenced you. The classical music of Scots composer Malcolm Lindsay has always been influential on my work and my state of mind while working. But other than that, I am less influenced by artists and more by environments, places, circumstances, and experiences. Where are you based? I'm split three ways between my home studio in the northeast of Scotland, the GPS, that's Glasgow Print Studio, and the JPW, Jerusalem Print Workshop. Favorite app is that one that orders pizza. Favorite movie of the year, all-time favorite movie would be anything by the Frenchman Jacques Tati. The book on your bedside table, Strange Things Happen, the drummer Stuart Copeland's autobiography. He's a talented and humorous storyteller. Also, The Great Partnership by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Your work in three words, shalom, salam, peace. Alternatively, forgiveness, compassion, coexistence. Emerging talent to watch out for. I think any emerging visual artist who's willing to learn how to draw in any form or style should be given due credit. And they can then turn to whatever they want with genuine authority. Biggest challenge to date has to be staying sane and at peace in the midst of this manic world, and maybe not using that pizza app too often. Proudest moment. Any moment I realized I'm dad of a doctor, my daughter, and an architect, my son. Next big thing, World War III. Where would you like to be in 10 years' time? Still outrunning on a darkening, rainy evening. Bliss. And the final question, what would you say to your younger self? Remember, son, growing old is mandatory. Growing up, that's optional. So back to the question, what makes this artist tick? That may be your question. My question is, how come I often end up doing residencies in a conflict zone of some sort? Elizabeth Mahoney, when she was reviewing my 2001 show at the Glasgow Print Studio, said, you get the strong sense that Duffin is attracted to places in conflict, irrevocably shaped by it. And she has a point. Firstly, Moscow, during the collapse of communism and the Balkans, Mother Russia too. And that was also a time when Gorbachev was overthrown in 1991. And of course, the breakup of Yugoslavia and the Serb-Croat Bosnian War, with which I had a direct and personal contact. And I was first in Jerusalem around the time of Yitzhak Rabin's assassination, during the turmoil of the first Intifada, that's the Arab uprising. And then Belfast twice, post Good Friday Agreement, fortunately. But where I discovered, not far from my digs, Jerusalem Street, alongside Cairo Street, Damascus Street, Palestine Street. And then it was back to JPW, Jerusalem Print Workshop, for 4 more residencies in the last 7 years. And that included the RSA funded one in 2016 it was. So as I've already said, I'm perhaps influenced more by environments, places, circumstances, and experiences. And I've had many varied and mixed experiences in Jerusalem, such as the time in 1996, when there was a loud bang in the middle of the day, in the middle of the street, and I was standing looking in Steimatsky, the bookshop's window in downtown central West Jerusalem, and I was just about to walk in. And then all I saw suddenly was people scattering and pigeons taking flight. And then with the realization that it wasn't actually a bomb, it was just a car backfiring, life resumed its normal hectic pace. Soon, however, a colleague of mine from the JPW wasn't going to be quite so lucky. Or the time that there was a floorboard, a bomb under the floorboards at the workshop. One day back home in Scotland, I had a phone call from Arik Kalemnik. He's the founder and the director of the workshop. He's now a good friend of mine, and he called me just to have a chat. And I said to him that I just used the Street of Prophets road sign. Actually, Alan, I think we've got a picture here we could call up. And it's the Street of Prophets road sign, a beautiful ceramic. There it's there, yeah. It's a beautiful ceramic street sign at the foot of the stairs leading up to the workshop from the street. And I used it in this piece of work. There you see it at the top. And I said to my friend Arik that I would send him a JPEG of it. Well, you'd better send it quickly, he said, before they blow it up. So I inquired what he meant. What do you mean by this? Alana, have we got another image there we can call up? That's the one, yeah. Anyway, they found this whole suitcase full of Semtex explosives wired to a mobile phone. The ringing of the phone would be produce the charge that's going to detonate this explosion. And it was crammed up against the back door of the gallery on the ground floor. This is the workshop here. You can see the front door in the ground floor gallery, but this was jammed up against the back door. And right enough, I remember reading about that in the Jerusalem Post, the media online the day before. And the guy who found it was hailed as a hero for yanking the wires out to defuse it seconds before the phone rang in his hands. The inside story, according to my friend Eric, was that actually the guy was just trying to steal the mobile phone. Hero by default. And then last summer, I had just left the gallery when where my exhibition had opened, and it was a drone strike that hit the roof, you know. Anyway, so what about the 2016 residency at JPW? That was mainly funded by the RSA's Gillis bequest. If everything seemed to go wrong for me the time before in Jerusalem, that was self-funded in 2013, then everything this time was just perfect. This time, no airline delayed my flight, no banks refused my card, and no soldier pointed the machine gun straight at me and shouted at me. This time I landed at Tel Aviv airport on time at 5 a.m. on the morning of the 4th of September. And the shared minibus taxi to Jerusalem drove the hair-raising 30-odd miles inland, rising from Tel Aviv at sea level on the Med Coast to Jerusalem over 3,000 feet up in the rugged Judean mountains. And it completed the journey without a major crash this time. And it dropped each of us at our respective hotels. But for me, it dropped me at the door of the Jerusalem print workshop at 8 a.m. And as Sunday's the first working day of the week in Israel, I was able to immediately set up and start printmaking. So for that residency, I succeeded and started 3 new plates, 2 Mexitants while in the workshop, and a 3rd plate back in my hotel room in downtown West Jerusalem, which I'd conveniently turned into another studio. And that particular Mexitant is actually on show at the Academy in my current exhibition. Okay, so that's some of the things that have happened to me, some of my experiences. What's going through my head most of the time? Arthur C. Clarke, science fiction writer and inventor, said 2 possibilities exist. Either we're alone in the universe or we're not. Both possibilities are equally terrifying. And I mention this because I'm thinking back to when I was a kid in the 60s, when I was led to believe in the future I would be taking my kids to the moon on holiday. That's what they said on Tomorrow's World. Science was all the rage, and much of what was still science fiction back then is now commonplace in our 21st century civilization. And many predictions have indeed come to pass. Not the moon one, unfortunately, that would have been fun. But in our contemporary world, we're still fairly addicted to science. And we like to quote the science bit to prove our point. More so now than ever during the months of lockdown, we have been hearing so much about being guided by the science to try to find a way forward. And we employ the science bit to back up so many arguments. We've even used it to prove the non-existence of God. However, when the science bit uncovers or proposes something we don't like, isn't it just so typically human to quietly ignoring it, hoping it will go away after a while and shut up? Indulge me for a moment. Let's look at the whole "is there life out there" debate, as mentioned by Arthur C. Clarke, as an example. Is there life out there amongst the billions of stars with our many, many billions of habitable planets? Logic and sheer probability says there must be, but the science bit has also stated it may only be simple, single-celled life forms, the amoeba. Why? Well, there's a science bit called the fateful encounter hypothesis. Don't worry about its name, but it states that mathematically, complex life, that's multicellular life, never mind intelligent life, is likely to be much rarer than we have previously assumed. Complex life forms could actually be considered a galactic or even a universal rarity. In fact, it's considered by some scientists so unlikely it may have happened only the once. Now, this is where my thinking in this short talk this evening starts to relate to my experiences in Jerusalem and other places, to what I make as an artist and to the work on show at the Academy. Because although this exhibition of work isn't so much about my science interests, it does totally relate to something that Professor Brian Cox said in a BBC TV programme on this very subject just a few years ago. He said, in fact, we may be alone in the universe after all. More importantly, though, was his response to this statement. In that case, he said, that makes us very precious indeed. And if we are unique, surely we have an extra responsibility to look after ourselves, our planet, and all life on it. You've maybe heard it said, we haven't inherited the world from our parents, we've borrowed it from our children. So where on earth do we start with looking after ourselves and our planet and all life on it? Well, a friend of mine who's a Church of Scotland minister gave a talk one Sunday morning, and he said, you know, I could stand up here and I could deliver you a sermon with, let's say, 10 bullet points. Perhaps you agree with 9 of those points and you disagree with one of them. Guaranteed, he said, it will be the one point you disagree with that you'll remember. Why? What is it about the condition of the human psyche that wants to seek out that one point to argue about, and yet apparently fails to celebrate and build on the 90% of stuff we agree on? As I've already hinted at, scientific knowledge has proposed a rational understanding of our old superstitions and beliefs, and to some, God has even been disproven and explained away in the reason that follows. But the irony is so true of science that many of the greatest discoveries were and continue to be made possible by what I call an audacity of imagination. That's actually the title of one of my 2016 residency messages. It's on show at the RSA just now. An audacity of imagination, a leap of faith. I think, therefore, we can question this totally scientific view of the world by saying that intuition and faith are as essential as logic and reason. And perhaps Einstein was fairly close to the mark when he said, religion without science is lame, science without religion is blind. Now, most of us, you and I, will accept that there's a balance to be found between science and religion. And there are different ways of expressing different aspects of the same universe and our place within it. What is a science, after all? Asks Jacques-Yves Cousteau, a childhood hero of mine. It's when someone curious is looking through a keyhole, the keyhole of nature, trying to know what's going on. If that's the case, then what is religion? I'd say it's when someone curious is looking through a keyhole of not nature, but experience, trying to know what's going on. Science takes things apart to see how they work. Religion puts things together to see what they mean. This, in many ways, brings us full circle again to resolving, opinionated conflicts, and we see them at local, national, and global levels, and masquerading as freedom of speech. Living in the liberal Western world, I do support the right for self-expression. I am an artist, after all. But although I support the right to do a certain thing, I hope I will always question if given particular circumstances, it is in fact the right thing to do or to say. Sounds old-fashioned to say this, and without getting all preachy about it, whatever happened to consideration for others? Freedom of speech is not absolute, and responsibilities are attached to it. It is a powerful tool, but used selfishly, it can easily become a powerful weapon. Freedom of speech presents us with the opportunity, the responsibility, and the tools to narrow the gap of misunderstanding and conflict, not to widen it. Witness what is happening once again in Paris. For me then, the welfare of Jerusalem today and throughout history has become an indication to the well-being of our own humanity, not just as individuals, but collectively, globally, as a society, indeed as a civilization. And that's why I always say that my work is not about Jerusalem. Jerusalem has become the foundation of much of what I do as an artist, and there are constant references to Jerusalem in my work. But I see the conflicts and the potential for resolution that's centered around Jerusalem as indicative of much wider global issues. So finally, in conclusion, I'd just like to leave you with a wee thought, and it's an old negotiator's maxim that simply says, there's probably more that unites us than divides us. So, along with a smile, I can't think of a better starting point for peace than that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what my exhibition at the Royal Scottish Academy is all about. Thank you. Here's what it says. There's a running theme of contrast through your work, Stuart. War, peace, old, new. Do you see Jerusalem as the ultimate place of contrast? And if so, do you think these contrasts are becoming more polarized in the 25 years I've been visiting the city? I don't see Jerusalem as the ultimate place of contrast. I love cities. I'm a city guy, although I live in rurally, and I get the best of both worlds. And it seems to be the crazier the city, the more I seem to like it, you know. But yes, it is becoming more polarized in the 25 years I've been visiting the city. I'm concerned that we're forgetting, as we seem to do, the lessons we've learned from our history. Do I learn my mistakes? Do I learn from my mistakes? Absolutely, because now I seem to be able to repeat my mistakes almost perfectly. Do we learn from our mistakes? I see in Jerusalem, it's the youth and amongst the younger generations where fundamentalist attitudes seem to be taking hold. And a friend of mine who is still in what was Yugoslavia and Croatia, and she came through the Bosnian Croat War, she's working with all sorts of types of folks in rehabilitation, has been since the early 90s. And she says she's no major problem with the 70-year-olds, the 60-year-olds, 50, 40-year-olds, even the 30-year-olds. It's the 20-year-olds and younger who don't remember what it was like that she's having issues with. And I have seen that in Jerusalem, and I think that is just an indication of a global issue amongst the younger generations. Another question is this: did you always have an interest in visiting Jerusalem before your first residency? Surprised that the city had become important to your life and work? I was aware of Jerusalem because I actually have a Christian upbringing, and I was aware that Jerusalem exists in the Bible, but I didn't really consider it as being a contemporary place with ordinary everyday life like any other habitation on the planet. And my first connection with Jerusalem was purely cultural, an artist exchange between Glasgow Print Studio and Jerusalem Print Workshop. I had no idea at the time that this was going to keep me occupied, frustrated, and fascinated for the next 25 years. I can see no end to it. I've definitely bitten off more than I can chew. Yeah. Here's another question that says, how do people from different backgrounds in Israel view your work and the concepts and feelings behind it? I was quite surprised when I was selected by the British Council and the Jerusalem Print Workshop, because a lot of my previous imagery at the time was dealing with, yes, with conflict, no resolution at that point. And I had been using images from my interest in Renaissance art, and they were primarily Christian-based images, nothing religious about it as such, but it was familiar imagery, Renaissance imagery to me. And I was surprised that people in Israel, they took to this. So they look at my work and they see, I think now, something beyond the idea of conflict. They see something about conflict and resolution in it. And I think at the end of the day, you know, when I've been contacted through social media and networking platforms by Israelis, by Palestinians, by Jewish, by non-religious people, by, you know, by Palestinians, by Muslims, by, you know, all sorts, to contact and to network with me. So I must be doing something right if folks from all these different strands seem to be able to relate to it. I hope I've bypassed politics, because I am more concerned for principles. So perhaps that's something to do with it. I'm looking at questions here. Thinking about my musical side is the next question here. I'm wondering if there's any particular pieces of music that you find to be good accompaniment to making art. And it's a question from Graham Pert, a friend of mine who's always questioning me. Yeah, what does Banksy make of your work, Stuart? Yeah, you spotted that. There was a piece, I love Banksy's work, by the way. Someone who can make a point and at the same time is making you laugh out loud. And then you think, oh, that's a serious point in there. I think it really has made something worthwhile. And I hope there's something of that in my work as well. But yeah, it's just to confess here, I did take this street is a designated riot zone. Please take your litter home, from Banksy, who was spray painting walls. It says, this wall is a designated graffiti area. Please take your litter home. And that made me laugh out loud. So does that answer your question? Oh no, pieces of music. I don't know. Again, just going back to Malcolm Lindsay's music, that piece of music came about when Malcolm asked me to go out and just photograph things round about Jerusalem and record some sounds and things. And I've always found that particular piece of music hauntingly beautiful piece of music. And when I had my hearing, I used to listen to that piece of music an awful lot. Strangely enough, when I had my hearing, LTJ Bookham's seminal piece of work called Progression Sessions, which is in fact drum and bass from the mid-90s, that is another piece of work which I relate to because it's instrumental, it's incredibly ethereal, and I think very evocative of my memory of my time, first time in Jerusalem. What made you go down the route of printmaking? I'm asking because he knew my print work. This is from Malcolm, the composer. He knew my work for years before he realised he could paint. Actually, he loves both mediums. I love both mediums. I was printmaking for a long time before I realised I could paint. And every time I painted, you know, it was like having fun and, you know, doing stuff. And it was never something I really did seriously. And I didn't exhibit it much. I get involved in printmaking. Make a confession here. I came through art school in the old-fashioned days when you didn't specialise right at the beginning. you specialized in everything in first year, and rather than specializing in second year, you dropped something. So I went through second year doing painting and sculpture, and it was at the end of my second year I tried all these different things, and I was getting a little bit worried, because although I loved jewelry and sculpture and painting and stuff, there was nothing I really liked. And I did a bit of textile, did the textiles block, didn't like it, did the ceramics block, didn't like it, and I was running out of things to try. And I tried printmaking and I fell in love with it. And I think for me, intaglio printmaking in particular, that's etching and engraving, as opposed to screen printing and lithography and things. For me, being able to take a metal plate and etch it, drill it, hammer it, beat it, corrode it, polish it, grind it, smooth it off, and then fill this plate physically with ink and still somehow manage to print it on an etching press, and you'll still get results. It's almost the closest thing to three-dimensional working in 2 dimensions. It's the tactile quality in particular about etching that I just instantly fell in love with, and I've never looked back. Hope that answers your question. Yeah. Another one coming in. What made you go down the route of print? Oh no, that's Mark's. From Sheila. Hi, Sheila. I'm so pleased you still have such a strong connection. How's my Hebrew? I was about to say Ochin Plocha, but that's actually Russian. That's how bad my Hebrew is. Not good. I started to learn Hebrew actually, and 2 things happened. My hearing blew out, so I kind of stopped. And the second thing that happened, I was still very much in touch with Jerusalem Print Workshop. And their English is so good, I just used to text or email my Hebrew to get it corrected by Ofka at Jerusalem Print Workshop. So my Hebrew never really took off, unfortunately. How do you capture images in Jerusalem for your work? Photography, sketches from memory? I'm not one for sketching. For some strange reason, I'm one for experiencing something, being present at the time and being there and taking away a memory and an experience. I will photograph things. Yeah, I'm one for taking photographs, but I don't work from photographs. They're a way of basically jogging my memory. So that's kind of how I work. A message and a question coming in from Ian. Hi, Ian. Your work uses strong symbolism. Eggs, for instance, have been a strong element in your images for many years. Do these always have a particular meaning in each picture? Yes, is the simple answer. If I see something that I want to put in a picture, I will look at it and think that would work visually. It has to be visually important, visually attractive, visually relevant. But I also have to find a meaning, find a symbol, whether it's personal symbolism or recognized symbolism. And if I can't attach a meaning to that particular object that I want to put into a picture, then no matter how attractive it is, I won't use it. So I always use things that I can attach symbolism to. And images have different meanings in different circumstances, and they have different meanings to different people, and they have different meanings in different cultures. The egg, for example, I used to use a broken egg because I've got broken eggs and things that I've collected, things that I've got lying around my studio. And to me, a broken egg was a symbol of something at the time when I started using it, something lost, something damaged, something empty. But then it's also a new start. You know, that egg is a symbol of fertility, a symbol of life. So there's different ways of looking at these images, which is why quite often people do ask me to explain. And I have an issue with artists that say a picture should speak for itself. Sometimes it can, but going back to my Renaissance experiences, in the old days, there was a written code of symbols that people could understand. They knew They were perhaps illiterate in the old days, and they could look at a painting and they could read this painting or a sculpture or a piece of architecture because they knew what the symbolism meant. The church was primarily the patron of the arts in those days. Now, artists are free to make up any symbolism they want. So no wonder we've no idea what they're talking about. No wonder you've got no idea what I'm on about, unless I get the chance to explain that. Some pictures do speak for themselves, but not all of them. Hope that answers your question, Ian. If not, anybody, feel free to email me or email the RSA and I'll pass it across. From Graham, you used to work very much in monochrome, then more recently moved to colour, into digital composition and into oils, all the same decade. What does colour mean in your work? I don't go for symbolism in colour, but basically what I tend to do is pick a colour and then start to work around that. I suppose if I was to look at a lot of my digital printmaking, my colour work and my painting, there is a background colour and everything seems to hang on that. The collages are perhaps the exception to that, in that they're made completely differently. There's no background colour to that. I think I'm a great lover of monochrome work, and my favourite colour is still black. Any colour as long as it's black, said Henry Ford, and I agree with that one. From Claire, hi Claire. How do you find the patience for the prep? With Mexitant you're talking about, possibly in particular, Mexitant is a very laborious process and there's an awful lot of preparation to do. It edifies the soul if you're spending 3-4 weeks simply rocking a plate with this tool meticulously all over the plate, and you're not doing a stroke of work and you're not creating any art, but you get the time to think about stuff, to stare out the window, to make use of that time to consider how the image is going to develop. Other than that, I think it's just a natural patience I have. Some folks are impatient, and that lends itself to the dynamic aspect of their work, thinking about some artists that can produce something incredibly quickly. And there it is. Thinking back to my time in Russia, how people can respond to situations and circumstances at the time. Within a day, one of my fellow artists who came out to that residency with us, we arrived there, just to explain, it was middle of winter really, and the printmaker's workshop was in the middle of a forest on the edge of this huge lake, silver birch trees. The lake was covered in 4 feet of snow. And the next day I was looking out my studio window, I was looking at an etching plate thinking, what am I going to do? And I saw my colleague, my friend Jonathan, walking out into the middle of this frozen lake. And I thought, what's he doing? And he stopped in the middle of this lake, a few hundred yards away, and he started with a shovel clearing the middle of the lake, and he piled this snow up into the middle, and he started to sculpt this big armchair that he had found away at the back of the cinema complex in this residential printmaker's workshop. That's how quickly he responded to the circumstances there. And the interesting thing was he'd cleared this big circle of ice in the middle of this lake to sculpt this armchair. And within about half an hour, this kid who from the local village was wondering what Jonathan was doing, had walked out into the middle of the lake, put on his ice skates and started ice skating around Jonathan in the middle of this lake. Performance art, and it all happened like that. It was 2 months before I produced anything. So some folks can react like that, and some folks are a bit slower off the mark. Another question. With a work that like Fads and Fallacies, that's the oil painting, is all that we're seeing is painting, or is there mixed media in the work? That painting, I call it an oil and canvas because it's not, strictly speaking, a painting. I'm a printmaker. I can use the tricks of the trade. There are elements of that painting which have been screen printed on. Not a lot, but one or two elements. I'm just trying to think fads and fallacies. If I've got an image of it here, yeah, things like technology. This is my fads and fallacies image. Things like, yeah, the lettering. Perhaps I would screen print type onto a canvas because I want to retain that mechanical type look. I could paint it, but I would lose something. So being a printmaker, coming from a print background, I love that kind of quality to something. So there's absolutely no reason why I couldn't utilize printmaking and screen print something onto the canvas. I know many artists that do similar things to that. A question from my bro, Graham. Hey, what is the inspiration for the angel statue images in your current work? I've always loved angels, and I do believe in guardian angels. I know, cue that old ABBA song. Oh, I'm a 70s kid. I'm not 100% sure where that angel came from. Well, I know where that angel came from. It came from about 8 or 10 different photographs and, you know, cut it up in Photoshop and collage it all together and things. But I do like the idea, I suppose, of a guardian angel, of something or someone looking out for us and looking after us. Again, it goes back to the Renaissance image of a saint holding in his or her hand an illustration of the city, the patron saint of that city. And it was all such a lovely image of an angel holding something and in the palm of his or her hand or its hands. My angels seem to be slightly confused in that they're looking at a bomb fizzing. And quite often I try to get an expression in those angels' faces, one of, oh, what now? How am I going to deal with this, you guys? You know, almost a kind of resigned kind of, oh heavens, here we go again. You know, to try to resolve the situation like, you know, human beings, kids, just, you know. So that's kind of where the angels come from, and there's maybe the inspiration behind using the angels. If you've got an idea of what the angels are about, let me know, because quite often an artist will do something that he or she doesn't intend. Feedback from you is always welcome. Okay, another question, right? Oh, that was from George about the angels things. On average, how many works are you likely to work on at any one time? I'm one of these guys that starts something, and when I'm waiting for the paint to dry, or while I'm waiting for the plate, which doesn't magically rock itself, but if I'm having a break from that, I'll go and do something else. Printmaking's like that, you know. Most of us have 2 or 3 plates on the go when you're waiting for a plate to heat up or cool down or to dry off or to etch. You don't just sit and stare out the window. Well, some folks might. I don't. I go and go on with something else. Perhaps I'll have 3, 4 things on the go at once with 3 or 4 other ideas kicking around. Quite often I'll maybe ditch 2 or 3 of those as one is developing, and I'll use the ideas from one to resolve another piece. Or perhaps I'll even rip up 2 or 3 collages which come together as one final collage. So that's the way I tend to work. On from Avril, what prompted you to include collage in the exhibition? A couple of things. It's when I was moving studio 6 years ago, and I was packing up my old studio, and I came across a couple of collages. I knew they were there, but they were from 1984, from the couple of years after I left art school. And I looked at them again, and I was actually quite astonished with how good they are, from the point of view that I thought, I could never make these now. You know, what did I have then that I've actually lost now, that allowed me to make such dynamic, such direct, such angst-ridden angst-filled collages. And I literally started to look at these collages again and pull them apart to see what was underneath them, to see how they were made. And I studied them, not just looked at them, I pulled them apart to see, what it is that these collages were constructed of, and tried to relearn that. So that's kind of what got me back into collage again, to try to relearn something that I'd lost. And I realized it is a very, very dynamic way of working. Also, I think it gives you other ideas. They started out just as working ideas, but they started to develop again as finished pieces of work in their own right. So that's kind of how they came about. And they're using the images that I'm using now, the graffiti and the Jerusalem-based things. And I just love collage. That's the other thing, working with Photoshop and painting and Mezzotint, which is so meticulous. With collage, you get the chance to rip bits of paper and, it's none of this digital thing. You've got glue stuck to your fingers and bits of paper, and it's fun as much as anything else. Another question here. There seems to be a certain Clouseau element to your bomb image. Absolutely. It's the old Pink Panther bomb, the big bomb with the word bomb written on it, just in case you didn't know. And again, it's that sense of humor, which I think is important in work, especially work which is dealing with quite a heavy or quite a difficult subject. There has to be an element of humor. Humor is a way of, maybe it's an escape valve for me, for the viewer, and it's also a way of just letting you know that, there's more to life than being serious all the time. I don't know, there is a kind of Clouseau-esque element to the bomb. The bomb, yeah. Any other questions coming in? Someone asked me recently what stage I was at in my work and in life. Stage in my work, I'm not sure where things are going to go now, just having put this exhibition together, get a chance to look at things. But I think perhaps I'm going to get interested again, in particular in the wake of not in the wake of, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but perhaps my interest in science, once again, is going to be revitalized, in the relationship between science and faith, the relationship between science and religion. Religion and faith are two very different things, said Father Pat Buckley, an Irish clergyman, and I agree with him. So what stage in life have I got to? I don't know, maybe I'm at the stage where my mind still thinks I'm 27. My sense of humor suggests I'm 12, but my body keeps asking me, are you sure you're not dead yet? That about sums me up, I think. I can't see any other questions. Yeah, why not? Let's wrap it up. It's a wrap, as they say in the music business. One more question. Says that was great, Stuart. Thanks. Okay, here's a question. I think I saw on your website that you had some images of Black Lives Matter. Do you see that as a conflict? I think the image you possibly saw was the one with the statues. I'm developing that idea. It was a response. And the Black Lives Matter campaign could have been better served if it was called Black Lives Also Matter. Because I think what happened with Black Lives Matter is the other extreme see that as a way of saying, hey, Black Lives Matter, but so do ours. And the two sides come together like this again. Yes, Black Lives Matter, but so do all lives. So perhaps that's an element, if I was going to tackle something like that in my work, that I would definitely put forward. There's always going to be a conflict between the extremes on all sides, the fundamentalists on this side, the fundamentalist scientists and the fundamentalist religious types will never see eye to eye. However, 90% or more of you and I, we're fine with this, you know. Here's a question. You mentioned Photoshop, Stuart. How much of your time is spent with keeping up with technology? I'm the guy who's probably paranoid of technology, at least with social media, as far as that's concerned. I do not like the way the algorithms can perform personal profiling of me. But I think technology is a fascinating thing, and it's the way the world's going. If it's out of the box, it's out of date, and we do have to keep up with technology, otherwise we can be left behind. So I don't keep up too much with technology, but I try to stay ahead. A time will come soon when not only my kids, but my grandkids will be teaching me how to keep up with it. So I'm not overly worried, you know. Getting lots of comments on how wonderful this is. Thank you. How do I find time for my own work whilst knocking my pan out for GPS for the Glasgow Print Studio? A, I have a very supportive wife and family, and B, I am one of those utterly selfish artists who is addicted to making work. Art is not a job necessarily, it's a way of life. I think Henry Moore said that. And that is me. If I don't get into my studio, I get grumpy. If I didn't have art, it was Tracy Emin's mum who said, if Tracy didn't have art, she'd probably be dead by now. Now, that's not me. That is an extreme position to take. And I can understand that with Tracy. But I'm addicted to making work, and I'm a workaholic. When I was full-time at the print studio, I was doing 40 hours a week for them, bringing a family up and still managing to get 30 to 40 hours a week of my own art done. That's how selfish I can get. Now I'm part-time at the Glasgow Print Studio. I can get about 80 hours a week done for myself as an artist. I'm also a bit insomniac. I didn't realize this. You know, I start regularly at 4 or 5 in the morning, work through to about 9 or 10 at night. And I was the same as a student. I was in art school, despite the fact I was out with a gigging band, 150 gigs a year we did on average. And out at 2 o'clock in the morning, finishing with the band, I was still in art school at 8 o'clock the next morning. And it was only my interest in science here when I was watching Michael Mosley on the BBC doing one of those, you know, I'm a Doctor programs. And he's one of these guys, a real scientist, experiments on himself. And he was doing a program about insomnia. And he was in the kitchen with the film crew talking to his son. And his son said, you know, I've been insomniac as well, Dad. You know, he said, you know, I've got no problems getting to sleep. I've got no problem staying asleep. But if I wake up early in the morning, I've got no chance I'll get back to sleep. I thought, that's me. I had no idea that was me. I've got no problems getting to sleep, no problem staying asleep. But if I wake up anytime after 4:30, that's me. Might as well get up and get into the studio and start working. So that probably answers your question, how I find time to do all that work when knocking my pan in. I have to say most of the time I'm exhausted. Would I like to say anything else before we wrap it up? Only to say everybody that's joined, you know, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Hand back to Alana.
So thank you so much, Stuart. I know you probably can't hear this at the moment, for all of your insights. I think it was really interesting to hear about your experiences in Jerusalem and how they've affected your work and your view of the world. I also want to thank everyone tonight for attending. Again, I really do urge you, if you have not done so already, to see Stuart's exhibition at the RSA before it closes on November 22nd. Please also make sure you visit our website to view upcoming digital events. We have one next Thursday, which is another closer look event just like this, about our Reduct Abstraction and Geometry in Scottish Art exhibition at the RSA. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for coming along, and we hope to see you at another event soon. Thank you.